Hi folks, I'm Spencer, and on today's episode of Cult Mania we're going to be talking about Speak No Evil. Yes, we will be speaking about evil. Haha. Now, Speak No Evil sort of popped up on Shudder without massive amounts of fanfare. It wasn't one of the films that, at least to my knowledge, Shudder were really promoting like they do sometimes. But then my Twitter feed was absolutely filled with people talking about it. And with good reason. It's a very interesting film. It's a very hard watch though, so if that's not your thing, that's something to be wary of. Directed by Christian Tafdrup, the film follows a Danish couple who, whilst on holiday, I believe in Italy, make friends with a Dutch couple. They both have children about the same age, and once they return home, they get a letter, a postcard saying, "Come stay with us." And, they seem lovely. They've got a bit of a shy child, but, it'll be nice. It'll be a nice way to get away. But then you remember it's a horror film. So, of course, this is the worst idea any of them could ever make.
Dear Louise, Björn and Agnes, how are you? We were just talking the other day how nice it was spending time with you this summer.
Now, it is worth noting early on, despite that being a very generic setup, this isn't going to be the straight sort of torture porn film that you think it's going to be. That if you go into it expecting that they're going to rock up and it's instantly just going to be all horror, which the film sort of starts out making you feel like it is going to be, you are going to be quite disappointed. This is a very slow burn. For a lot of the film, if it weren't for a lot of the more technical aspects, the story feels much more like a drama with a few weird dark moments in it. Like, it is a very dark drama, but it's not until you get much more towards the end of the film that the more purely horror stuff starts to come into it.
We would love to invite you to come to visit us.
You made it!
Which means you need to be invested in the characters. And thankfully, the characters here are very interesting, and more importantly, the performances are very good. Morten Burian and Sidsel Sim Koch play the Danish family, and the Dutch family are played by Fedja van Huit and Carina Smulders. And I believe they are actually married in real life, unless IMDb is lying to me. It may well be. It's happened before. Now, the Danish family are very quiet, very nice, everything feels like it is meant to cause as little disruption to anyone or anything as possible. Such as when we're first introduced to Bjorn, he is a pushover. He gives his daughters lounger at the pool away, straight away, with no argument or anything. They're very much this sort of, status quo. Let's just let everything happen, which ends up being a huge part of the plot. But they managed to do that whilst it can be infuriating, but the actors manage to make you care and make you feel like you're attached to them, and it's more frustrating because you like them rather than just fucking hell. Then you have the Dutch couple who have to juggle being cool, fun, handsome, beautiful, lovely, and start to weave in these darker sides. There are scenes in which the father loses his temper, and they're done so well because it's got that realistic nature of, you just almost see that failed, didn't it? You see the switch flip and everything suddenly goes, from I'm lovely and cool and I just want to make you happy to I'm an absolute dickbag and I'm going to be horrible. And again, it sort of manages, everything feels realistic. Everything feels like there is a multi-layered thing going on where you aren't just watching these stereotypes. that realistic aspect is sort of carried over into the cinematography. It lurches between these two very distinct styles, but it works very, very well. You have these huge, grand, wide shots, often with either, like a tiny little car travelling or, people walking along a horizon line, and these are completely locked off, they're completely static. And they feel big and grandiose, and because often your characters are really small, it adds that feeling that they are trapped. And then often when we move into more conversational sequences, it moves into a much more handheld, long takes, getting up nice and close, the camera moving around, vaguely documentary, very British kitchen sink, which adds a nice intensity because it makes you feel much more like you are in the scenario with them. It reminded me a lot of the early sequences in something like Kill List, where you have these mundane, realistic sequences playing out where you are right in the middle of it, and just as things are getting more and more uncomfortable, that because you are in there and the camera's got that slight movement to it, it really helps to add an intensity to it.
So many things have felt so wrong.
The score for Speak No Evil is also incredibly intense and very, very melodramatic, very classic. It's all very orchestral, lots of big strings, big brass bass sound, and often showing you stuff that is not dramatic. The score often kicks up on those big, huge wides. The film opens with just a car travelling through the night, and all it is the main family arriving at a hotel. It's it's nothing particularly dramatic. It's a spooky shot because it's the headlights going through this long winding path, but the score is going absolutely bananas. It's going boom, 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 that sort of thing, and it's like, wow, we're in full-on horror mode. And I think that was one of the things that made me think this is going to be really full-on, but it isn't. A lot of the darker stuff is actually accompanied by complete silence or a very sort of minimal atmospheric notion, rather than often you're just seeing, like, I don't know, the two families out for a walk and the score is going absolutely bananas behind it. But again, it creates this off equilibrium similar to how you swap in between the two different types of cinematography, and it works. I was a bit like, oh, is this going to be a bit annoying? But it really wasn't. That also actually reminded me a little bit of Kill List, in that you get a lot of sequences in which you can see either you might get a little bit of slow motion, characters are talking, but all of the diegetic sound is gone, and you've just got this very overwrought soundtrack over the top. And that, again, it's just creepy. And again, the film sort of needs that to remind you that it's a horror film, because it is so realistic and so much built around the interactions between characters, and the unsettling stuff is often sequences in which a parent is talking to a child and it's very uncomfortable, or it's little things in conversations that you go, that's a red flag, leave, go now, stop trying to be polite. That's basically the message of the film. Don't be polite. If people are a dick, tell them they're a dick, or get out, or run, or do whatever. That does actually bring me to a bit of a trigger warning. Child abuse comes up in the film. It's not afraid to deal with that because, you can sort of see it coming early on. So that is just a bit of a warning.
Because we do things differently?
Stuff that I was a bit less keen on. The film does feel long, and I think in part that's because it is uncomfortable. And I don't think it's a massive drag, but it is going to be something that's going to put a lot of people off, I think. It is... it's only about 90 minutes, but it feels much more like something that's 2 hours plus, and it could have perhaps been a little bit shorter, but it is really effective, and by the end I was fully wrapped up in it. You know, it had... I think it's as much that it's quite an immersive experience and makes you feel uncomfortable. Thus, it isn't, you know, a fun romp in which it feels like things are just happening over and over. So I don't even know if that's a criticism. The only massive criticism I do have is if you are watching this on Shudder, most of the film, despite obviously the Danish-Dutch thing, most of the film's in English. Very, very little of it is in Danish or Dutch. All of the Dutch bits you can't understand because you are from the Danish family's perspective. But everything else is subtitled, including the English, and I couldn't find a way to turn that off, and that was just vaguely grating, because I find myself, because the writing is there, I ended up reading a lot of it, and it did perhaps seem a little bit distracting. I just kind of wish there'd been an option to take them off, that they weren't baked into the film. But I mean, that's my major criticisms that I had. I didn't really have anything else. I mean, it's not going to be like a top film of the year for me, but it is a really effective film. It is really creepy. It is unsettling. It feels like it's really being sold as like extreme cinema. And for a large part of the film, it doesn't perhaps fulfill that in a degree that I think a lot of people are going to expect. You know, it doesn't. They don't go to the house and the film turn into Frontiers or something like, or Hostel. But that being said, the end of the film, I feel like will stay with me for a little bit. It is quite a hefty moment towards the end. So that is something that is... I think it's going to find a very specific audience that are willing to go with the slow burn, uncomfortable stuff to get to the more extreme sequences. So I think it is going to be divisive, but it is definitely worth checking out. It's one of the best things that Shudder have put out in recent memory. I've been a bit disappointed with a lot of their, you know, the Shudder original stuff recently, but this is something really interesting, and I think despite it being an uncomfortable watch, I would quite happily watch again, and could actually be the sort of film that would be beneficial to having a second watch. So yeah, if you like a sort of horror adjacent drama that goes to some quite uncomfortable places, which I know is not going to be for everyone, it is well worth checking out. So yeah, Speak No Evil. Recommended. But that's just my opinion. What did you think of Speak No Evil? Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos, and I shall see you next time.